including
Even the
that dog,
dogs.
whoever that is.
That's me.
Okay,
Me,
so
2 dogs.
all right, so let's go ahead and start again for our post-break discussion. Our next agenda item is on watershed inventory. So this is sort of the background to why you want those tools that we've been discussing. And then Julie also helps us look at what else is part of a watershed inventory. So, you know, by this time, Julie's a longtime watershed coordinator, has worked on many different watersheds and has helped us out as a team leader for quite a number of years. I want to just add, because I've been staring at it, that nice image in the middle. I actually paid an artist to do that probably 20 years ago, and I still like it. You know, some things from 20 years ago you got to throw out, but I just really like this one still, because, you know, the person with her laptop and the guy looking at the magnifying glass with his corn stalk. So it always makes me happy to look at it. But Julie, again, thanks for doing this. As you can see from the agenda, there will be 2 times when we go into breakout groups, and then we'll come back together again. So please take it away, Julie.
Well, thank you, Jane. And yes, I do love this picture. That's why I keep it on my PowerPoint, because it does show the different ways we're going to try to characterize or investigate our watershed. I'm just going to talk about several of those. And it doesn't want to do that. There we go. So investigating everything we can about that certain area that you want to talk about. You're going to look at both the condition of the watershed and the nature of the watershed. And we have to remember that the whole thing is a path. And so we're just in the first part of this path. The first thing we talked about a couple of weeks ago or sessions ago, building those partnerships and getting stakeholders involved. But today we're going to talk about this characterizing of this watershed, and hopefully it ends up with solutions that actually improve water quality. And so I wanted to just start off with why do we even start an inventory? It's a way to discover what's going on, what's affecting. It also can be used as a tool that you can bring to the public to educate citizens, to talk with your county commissioners about. And also is a great way to form partnerships. Hey, you know this place? We know this place. We both enjoy this place. Let's join efforts in helping this get better. And then, you know, EPA and IDM's involved in trying to make sure we set goals and actually address the water quality and that sort of thing. And when you have devised a inventory and a plan, then you can seek funding to actually implement the plan. Then you can actually change some things that's going on. But also an inventory now is what we call benchmark or baseline data. So we know that we have improved. Like we need to have some kind of data now that later we can compare to. And so I've put together 5 easy steps, 5 easy ways to inventory your watershed. And each icon is going to go along with it. My little detective here just talks about a desktop survey or investigating what's going on. And then we actually collect water data. That's that girl with her hand in the water in the creek. That's called water monitoring. And then you have to drive around the watershed or move around the watershed in some way to actually look at what's going on. And we call that a windshield survey. And so my car represents that. And then you compile all the data together into reports. And so my person with a hand on a notebook and a keyboard is representing that step 4 of collecting your data and filing reports. And then the 5th one is actually using it to do something about what you've just decided, to enact upon your goals and to actually make a difference. So we'll start with the detective. So the desktop survey is actually just kind of researching some of the data you've already done. You learned some of these tools earlier, the Indiana map I use a lot. Actually learned about Indiana maps through the Watershed Academy, and I use it a lot in a watershed work. But usually the desktop survey is a one-time activity. You just go and search what's available already and look that stuff up, and then you will use that later throughout your plan. And we have to remember, I told in my breakout session, we have to remember that some things are static, some things don't really change. Over 100 years, they've been the same. That would be like your watershed boundaries, the geological bedrock layer underneath our state, where caves and sinkholes are, that sort of thing. Topography. It would take a major catastrophe or a human intervention to change some of these things. I also like to point out, I try to look in my watershed where there are historical sites and cemeteries, because those are important as well, that we always know where those are and we protect those. So you talked a little bit about the web soil survey. That's that online tool that was discussed earlier today. It helps me know drainage. It helps me know potential septic system issues, which is a watershed issue. And also can look at some wetland areas or areas that used to be wetlands or should return to wetlands, that sort of thing. So I do like the web soil survey. I've also used it for people just coming to me and saying, how do I know what my soil is? And then showing them this public accessible tool that they can find out for themselves. And it's really user friendly, as you guys have, if you did that, have found out. And then Indiana Maps, my favorite. Again, Indiana Watershed Leadership Academy taught me this tool, and I love it, and I use it all the time. It has, I personally don't have ArcGIS layer access. They don't have that program. I do have those in my office who do, and they can help me, but this is something I could do without asking for help. So I really like that. So some of these characters we said were stable, been that way for 100 years. Others of them, they would change like only after something intensifies in your watershed. For Gibson County, the Toyota Motor Manufacturing Company came to town. So that's something that's different that wasn't there before. A tornado could go through and change some things, some of those things. So that's a little bit different. You can find in a desktop inventory as well. Where are your public wastewater treatment plants? Do you have any national or public lands? Do you have a public access site where people can get their canoes right into the creek? Are there any MS4s, which is a municipal separate storm sewer system? That's a large town that has their sewer system separate from their storm systems. And so knowing all that information helps you with your watershed inventory as well. It was interesting that in one of my surveys that I did in my watershed, 2 of the 4 towns in the watershed, and yeah, it's very rural because there's only 4 towns in the watershed, but 2 of those did not even have a wastewater treatment plant. So it's kind of interesting when you start looking at that kind of stuff. Some information will fluctuate very rapidly. That's like your stream habitat or fish consumption advisory. You can find the fish consumption advisory on the Indiana Department of Health. But flooding advisories, today's going to be a flood day, yesterday wasn't. So some things change, but you can still look at that online in a desktop model as well. This map shows me, these are dots. This is my county, Gibson County, and these dots are showing me where I have USGS in-stream gauges, so they can tell me flow data, and I can pull that data up from the USGS website when I know the address of that, the numerical address of this thing, and then I can figure out what's going on over time. So this is just an example of that map, that data that I can get from that. This, my gauge is 0337650. That's the Pickel River near Princeton, Indiana. And so I asked for its gauge height in feet, how high the water was in feet from 2012 to 2020. And you can see the regular pattern of floods and when they're occurring, and the regular pattern of droughts and when they're occurring. But I can also pinpoint something unusual and anomaly comes along. But you know, we can pretty well attest to the fact that this thing's going to flood at least, you know, every year or so because of this, and going to bottom out. This is the 2012 drought where it bottomed out. So you thought you'd only see that during the drought, but look, we did it even in non-drought years. So that kind of information is cool to have to give to your people as well. And then know where your point source pollution is at. These are the permitted facilities. They are affecting the water quality, but they're a needed facility. We need to have them. But it's nice to kind of know. I recently went out and did a water sample, and my phosphorus was through the roof. And I looked upstream, and I have a permitted facility, and a little farther upstream, another permitted facility. And then I went to their website and saw what they're allowed to discharge. And it kind of can help me mitigate my water data. Go, oh, that's why some things are going on a little different here than somewhere else. So this is all helpful. And then using Indiana Maps in the Lower Patoka watershed, which is this little weird shapy thing right here, I was able to pull up where I had animal operation, confined feeding animal operations, and these dots represented those. And I could see that there were 11 spread out throughout the watershed in 135,000 acres. But then in my next watershed, 132,000 acres, so a smaller watershed, they had 35 animal operations. And so figuring this out and where they're clustered, it can help me with as I'm looking at my data as well. these are permitted facilities, so they are going to affect water quality, but I can see that that's there and that's not over here. And so that helps me address what's going on in a more logical manner as we're discussing data. So tools for the detective. This is where our group discussion can come in. We're going to look at what tools or data sources have you used, or what tools and data may you find useful in watershed characteristic? That's one question. And then the other is, what else would you like to know about your watershed for which there may or may not be a data source available? So think about the tools you learned about this morning and what I've already kind of talked about, desktop tools. What kind of tools or data sources have I not talked about, or the group hasn't talked about, that you think should be added or is useful or you have used? Or in what kind of data source would we like to know about, but we just can't get that data?
Okay, thank you.
To send people to rooms?
Yeah, I'll just introduce a couple things. So first of all, you do have Google Slides with these 2 questions for each group. And when you're going to come back, we're going to do like last time, that 3 of the groups report back on the first question, and then 3 on the this set, and then 3 on the other one. So it's just to change it around. It's D, E, and F groups will come back and report what they've discovered about these 2 questions when we come back. I also wanted to mention here, the group leaders weren't all on, that this is the last time that the team leaders are going to be with us and that you're in these teams. So just as you have these last couple discussions, you can keep that in mind. And starting next week, we'll just be on your own without the team leaders. So thanks again, team leaders, for being with us. That's it. So we're going to have 7 minutes in the group. We were just discussing how long to make it. And I thought, well, I'll just ask also in the chat if anybody wants to give their opinion, but we're going to try this for 7 minutes and then report
And
back.
we have another breakout later in the presentation too.
Right. So D, E, and F will report back on this one. So recorders and reporters, please be ready from those sections. All right, now you can send us out, Sarah. And remind me where I'm going. B?
B.
Work for those people that were relying on electronic devices, keeping good neighbors and relationships when there's hot button issues like Loehr dam removal, and the liability with paddling with kids, especially as we open up the waterways for recreation. That's all.
Wow, these are fantastic. Does anybody have any questions or comments? I would just ask, how would a fishing derby work on a stream?
So you catch some fish, and whoever, whatever the rules are made up, and so what that could do is it could help people relate to the aquatic health of the stream. Hey, we only are catching, carp and catfish. What's going on here? I wanted to catch some bass or trout, and so it could be a teachable moment. Is one way to look at it.
I love that. This is really fantastic. Kudos to you guys. Okay. And group B, I was the temporary leader there. So Stephanie, I think you're our reporter.
Sure. So some ways to get others involved. You could potentially, in very rural areas where it's hard to get contact with some people, You could mail them the information and maybe they'll contribute and do their own survey and send it in. Try to get your families involved. Retirees are good ones to reach out to. They might have potentially more time to participate, and hold field trips. Landowners holding field trips for schools or whatever. At RSWCD, we do.
Sorry.
We also do field days. We have a forestry field day in the spring and a pasture field day in the fall. And then for what scares people, doing it by yourself when no one else wants to contribute and having to drive and write, get out of the car, take pictures, there's traffic, just keeping track of all of it. And then also trespassing on land or having adequate access.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? All right, Group C.
Yeah, we had a lot of similar answers to the first two groups, but one of our first suggestions to getting people like involved and stuff was like sending out a survey, kind of getting people to notice that you're out there. Hey, we're here. You want to come help? Surveys just asking like, would they be interested in helping? How much would they want to help? Like, when would be best for you and your schedule? Or different educational programs. Education with the kids is a great way to get parents involved because they either come with the kids or the kids go home and start talking about what they learned, and that makes the parents more interested, and it's a good way to get everybody in the family involved. Also, like outreach and volunteer programs like river cleanups, which we do in my watershed, and they always go really well and people really love doing that. Weed wrangles, and like they said earlier, food. Everybody loves a free meal, so if you offer free food, you'll probably get at least someone. Contacting local paddling groups or fishermen or hunters or people that are like really interested in the watershed and want to make sure that it's healthy and clean is a good way to get somebody involved, or just kind of advertising it in a way that shows like it's an adventure. You get to go out and do all these different things and see all these different things and meet all these different people. It's really interesting. And what scares us about doing the windshield surveys and stuff would be, like I said earlier, getting lost, not being able to use a GPS, or not even finding yourself on a map somewhere. The timing of surveys, we had someone talking about that they usually do their surveys in spring, but one year they got behind and had to do it closer to the fall, and they had all these standing crops and they couldn't do it as well, and it was a lot harder to do. So kind of being consistent in your timing. Some of us weren't very sure on what we would be even looking for, so just knowing what to look for and figuring out what you need to be reporting on, or the risk of danger, like a lot of farmers or just landowners who are very territorial of their land, and the water even going through their land, like if you go on their property, you might be chased off very quickly. So it could be an issue there. Or if you have a big area, like where do you start and what points do you start from? So those were some of our concerns.
Well, thank you. That was just great. Very well presented and a great list. Thank you. I only just noticed the active chat that's going on. So if others don't have their chat open, you may want to see this. Lots of good ideas about that fishing. So Julie, this is why I was looking at my agenda. I was going to take a second. Julie is going to finish us off still. But before that, I believe that was the last discussion. So I think we could take a minute here to say goodbye to our team leaders and thank them, except for Julie. Is that okay? What we could thank her there. So I don't know, team leaders, we have a minute or two if you want to say any more before. I didn't warn you on this one. So if you want to say anything, otherwise we'll just thank the team leaders. So if everybody wants to applaud or use the reaction, team leaders, thank you all. It's been great. Hopefully people see the value of having these folks around who are alumni who got you started, and then we will leave. Do any of the team leaders want to speak out?
Yeah, I just wanted to say best of luck to everybody. And it's always a blast to get to do this. So thank you.
Yeah, Jane, I'll even pop up there and say if anybody, again, throughout the rest of the course needs anything, we're here. Contact us, call us, email. We're still available. So appreciate having the opportunity, and good luck to the rest and the rest of your time.
Thank you. Lise?
That's what I was going to say too. Just the whole Watershed Leadership Academy is also about networking. So don't forget, if you can call us anytime. And SARE is a grant program. Let me know. And also we do have professional development. So call me about that if you ever want to do any professional development in sustainable ag.
Fantastic. And you see the great comments in the chat. Again, thanks. Be sure, team leaders, to read these wonderful comments about who rocks and who's awesome. That is fantastic. And who's left? Bob, do you want to say anything? Or
I was just going to say, I really enjoyed working with my group. And if anyone needs any help working on macroinvertebrates and trying to identify things, please feel free to contact me. I'm more than happy to help.
thanks a million. Okay, so now we will now finish. That's the last discussion for today. And now we'll be in the large group. So Julie is going to take us forward into how to use this to move forward. And then I'll be talking about the assignment and our workshop coming up. So thanks so much. And Julie, please go ahead.
All right, so just so we remember, getting others involved, the food, the fishing derby, all great answers, all good things to think about, just being creative and that sort of thing. But in terms of what scares you, the not having a GPS signal is very prevalent in my watershed. I just always have a map and a plat book with me. So, and then just be well-versed in street reading of signs and that sort of thing, knowing which way is north on my car and just heading that way. If anything else, you'll eventually get where you have a signal if you head in one direction long enough. But also where to start, and it's so big, and how do I know where to start? If you're doing a watershed management plan, they actually are going to ask you what they want to see, and that kind of helps guide you. They want to know what's the topography, and so as they ask these questions, you go through and you inventory. In Indiana Watershed Leadership Academy, kind of the same thing. Your modules are going to ask you to look for certain things. But if you have nothing guiding you, just have that little kid's heart and go out and just start looking and just write down everything, every city, every cow operation, whatever you're looking at. After a while, you'll get to visualize your watershed and how much is this and how much is that, and where things are, and just start at your back door. So the creek near you is where I always start, and then I kind of work my way out. And I tend to follow the creek upstream. So that's how I kind of inventory. That gives me a starting point, and then I know when I hit the headwaters, I can stop. So the step 4, we have 2 more to go. Step 4 is after you've done your desktop survey and you've done your water quality sampling and you've driven around the watershed and all those things are coming together. Now put all that data together. You'll have a better idea, a better interesting picture of what's going on in your watershed. One of the things I did in my inventory of the Patoka River was I found 7 illegal dump sites. These were massive amounts of stuff, as you can see with this picture. And what I was able to do was doesn't really look right on this map on my screen for some reason, but I was able to actually use maps and show exactly where they're located and show some of them were right on riverbank. Some of them were a little farther off. And so what did my team want to do? Where do we want to go? What do we want to hit? Where the floodplain is, we went to first, and then we had a little more time. And so we organized a system. And I was able to use this PowerPoint presentation with my highway department and my solid waste department, and actually partnership. My department brought the equipment to bring stuff up out of the creek, like couches and refrigerators. My solid waste department helped me get rid of them at no cost. The water quality in the watershed. So all that works. So as you have this information, you can present it. You need to have someone who is interested enough to listen to it, your citizens or your county councilman or your watershed group. But it helps you pinpoint what do we need to look at? Where do we need to go first? Where's our future problems going to be from? Some of this trash was going to be Even though this was on dry land, in a heavy rain and a flood, it's going to be in our water system. So we gotta do that. So we've kind of moved from this stakeholders and partnerships to characterizing watershed through this inventory. Now we're starting to set goals and try to identify some solutions to these goals. So one of the things you do is check out best management practices. IDEM, Indiana Department of Environmental Management, has a list of those that affect water quality directly. There are a bunch of best management practices. Not all of them may affect water quality, but look at those that do from that. And then you can, with your group, decide which one's going to best hit your goal or hit your goal. What's going to be the best. And so you're working on designing this plan of implementation, which we have this much money, let's do this. We have more money, let's go all the way. And you actually start to implement it. Can this company help us? Can this group of volunteers help us? And we start to work. So the 7 illegal dump sites, we did a stream cleanup. I had the local television department come. I have a national wildlife refuge on my watershed. So the friends of that refuge, the Friends of the Batoka River, came and helped. And again, I had the highway department with this great piece of equipment because I didn't want to bring those tires up. This is a bigger, steeper bank than it looks. I didn't want to drag the tires up. So having the equipment work, and then also using the solid waste with some dumpsters and stuff. This is a lot of stuff. It's not going to fit in the back of my truck. So we were able to use a dumpster, a construction dumpster was provided us by the solid waste department to help get some of this stuff done. So as you're using this data, your plans should be revisited every so often. Make sure the progress made is actually still there. You need to measure that progress. Do you need to come back and make improvements? You meet as a group and discuss what the group's progress is, what's working, what's not working, or what needs to be adjusted. And as we measure our progress, what I did was I went to my illegal dump site and looked at it after it was cleaned up and was thankful it had stayed clean. So nothing else needed to be done here. The people who had used it before had stopped using it once it got cleaned up. So that was good news for us in our watershed. So just remember the step 5, you need to do something, right? So you keep all this data, the maps, the photographs, the stream scores, and everything. You're going to have this piled up, and you're going to watch as your group progresses towards the goals that you have designed in this plan. But you need to look at improving the plan over time as you do things in the watershed. So, sub watershed A may be very much impaired, and you as a group come and you do all this work, and there's a stream cleanup, and a farmer starts to no-till and do cover crops, and now you've improved this sub watershed. So 7 years down the road, you may need to move to a different watershed. So that's how you improve your plan, is by readdressing the water quality issues, re-looking at them. IDEM likes to see things within the 5-year range or no more than 10 years ago, that sort of thing. So remember, that's a path that we're going to follow. We're going to do, this is a great, like Jane said, this is a great thing she had designed, whether you've got your writing, the clipboard, I see this, or you're doing your chemical analysis, or you're boating through the watershed, or you're just investigating the soil samples and the fish in there. You've got to record it all, run all the data, get your plan, implement your plan, and then after a couple of years, revise your plan to see if you need to make changes. And you will have solutions to water quality problems in your neighborhood at the end of all this. And that's it. And I think I ended like 3 minutes ahead of schedule.
You did. You're plenty early, Julie. So if anybody's worried
3
about the
minutes.
weather, we'll actually finish a little early, probably, if that's okay. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Julie? One thing I was regretting not saying at the beginning was that what I think is really great about her presentation is she speaks from her experience. You can tell. So we asked her to talk about what she's found. It's not sort of in theory. So we hope that by the end of this would be our 4 assignment, the 4th one, not this week, you will also be able to tell stories about what you did. Some goes great and some not as great, but that's what we'll be leading towards. So any questions for Julie or comments before we let her go as well? Julie, thank you. I'm sorry to say I missed recording part of that. Usually I turn on the recording. So But we have.
I'll use
most
last
of it.
year's recording. It was probably
Yeah,
better.
it is very
Sorry.
similar. So thank you so much. I think it's great. You're always doing such exciting things down there in the southwest part of the state. I've learned a lot from all that you've experienced, and I think your experience will help others as they're doing it. So thank you so much to Julie. Okay.
Oh, thank
Yeah,
you guys.
great.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Okay, so on the agenda, what we've got left is mainly a few things that I'm going to take time to talk about what's coming up. And so the next workshop overview, I'm not actually going to talk about so much about the next workshop. Let me just, I didn't actually put that together. All right, so as I think we've made clear, this was the last time you have the team facilitators. I hope that they've been helpful. I don't know for sure how they do it. We talked a little at the first workshop about how starting here, somebody will also be assigned to be facilitator, right? So we've assigned a recorder, a reporter, and then there will also be a facilitator. Your job is not to obviously be really directive, but just to help make sure that the discussion continues towards the questions. So we don't give you a lot of information in advance, but we figure this is part of leadership, that you should be able to facilitate a group as well as doing so many other things. Watershed leadership has a lot of challenges. So I guess that's the main thing I want to remind you of, make you aware of now, that we will not have those team leaders. I'm going to put the link to the feedback form again, just because so I don't forget it at the end, because sometimes I do that. So, and you can provide feedback on anything, but one of the questions besides the length of the breakout groups that popped into my head is, were the team leaders helpful, and how? And, it just always helps us improve, or if we needed to provide more information or do anything differently or any more information to you. We always welcome that. So that will be the next workshop here. I also wanted to turn to the in-person, workshop that's coming up at the end of March. We haven't talked about it much. So this will be at McCormick's Creek State Park, March 29th to 30th. And we hope it will be a great experience, that after 6 workshops of talking and getting to know each other a little bit and doing a lot of activities in common, then you will meet each other in person. Of course, unfortunately, we still have the pandemic, so we have to follow pandemic precautions, and we will expect people to have masks on during the indoor activities, except when you're eating. So we'll go through that more. That's in the future. So there's some disadvantages here, but I wanted to talk a little bit about it, as well as some opportunities for you or responsibilities for you. So we'll be outside at beautiful McCormick's Creek State Park. It's really lovely, and we've been there before, but always in January. So I'm hoping that the end of March, almost April, will be even better. Of course, we never know the weather. We have some speakers. For example, Bob Barr, who some of you may know of from IUPUI, he's really a geomorphologist, and he will give us a workshop both indoors, talking about how streams function and should function. And then he will actually be taking us outdoors and standing in the stream and doing measurements. So we have to talk more about this, but if you have knee wading boots, that will be very helpful. Or if you have a possibility of getting them before that, or hip waders are fine, but I don't think the stream should be that deep. But it is nice to be able to go into the stream. Otherwise, I don't think you'll have to cross the stream. So if you can't, you can't. Or if you have sneakers, you want to get wet, or I will bring some from our Purdue lab here, but not enough for everyone. So, because I'm sure you're stream people, so I'm sure many of you have boots anyway. So we'll have that workshop.
Jane,
Yes.
if we don't have those, where would we find something like that?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I happened to notice at my Meyer store the other day that they had all kinds of knee boots. So it's just anything that's waterproof. You don't have to go to, a camping store or something like that, but they would have them too. So just a rubber boot that's for gardening too, just that you can put on and stand in the stream would be fine.
Okay.
But obviously the camping stores, any fishing stores, certainly has them. It can be ones that, most people have them that sort of replaces your shoe. My favorite, harder to find, is ones that actually go over your shoes, because then you can keep your comfortable shoes on. And they're like ones that I used to have as a little kid, kind of galoshes that go over your shoes. And I like that kind. So,
Jane, they're also relatively easily available. And if you have a farm supply store like Farm and Fleet, Tractor Supply, Ace
Rural
Hardware
King.
sometimes has them.
I'm sure Walmart even does,
Okay.
and they're going to keep water out.
Okay,
And
thank you.
Amazon sends, ships them out relatively easily if you're an Amazon shopper as well, so that, you could try online options too.
Yes, and if you have trouble with that, I'll probably have 6 or 8 pairs with me. So, but just various sizes. So I think it's a useful thing to have for whenever we have to walk in mud or in streams. So, thank you, Sarah. Okay, so another workshop that we're going to have is this topic of dealing with climate change. And I guess I didn't write. So we thought it was an opportunity because we're there close to Bloomington, and Bloomington is the one city in the state, or one of the few cities in the state, that actually has a climate plan. So we've been talking with Kelsey Thedonia, who is a former Watershed Leadership Academy graduate. We have so many, a great network, and she is part of the team that developed that. So she's going to come out and maybe their sustainability leader. But I think it'll be helpful to see how one city actually does that. And even if your city has no chance of doing that, which I'm sure is the case for many of our cities or counties, the kind of things they look into, I think, are useful. So how we design not for the past water, but for the future, because it's increasing, right? So all the flooding that we have now, it's only going to increase. All the drainage problems we have now, it's going to increase. That's what our climate models are very certain of. This is not really uncertain at all. In the dry parts of the year, the summer and fall, we're getting drier. And in the wet parts of the year, the winter and spring will be getting wetter. So it will certainly increase flooding. So we're going to talk about how we might deal with that. And also I wanted to do it in person because we're going to talk about how you talk about these issues with people in your watershed or in your community, because obviously that's very sensitive for some of you, and we well recognize that. Besides that, we are also going to do some tasks like we'll identify the group project topics and groups. So you don't need to be thinking about it. Well, you can think about group projects before, that's part of it, right? We've got these workshops and we've got the assignments, and we've got the group projects. But we'll spend time during the workshop to brainstorm ideas and then sort of try and help people connect. And then we will come back together and absolutely connect. So by the time you leave, you will have a partner or 2 partners and a topic. But of course, the more you think about it beforehand, the more you're sure that you have a topic that you like. And if you want to set up your own groups, if you know somebody who is going to wish to do something similar, you're very welcome to do that. We're just taking time so that everybody feels confident by the end of that. We'll also have good social time, we'll have a cash bar indoors, and of course there's all the meals, and then we'll actually have outdoor walks. So this is from 2019 when we were there, and it was the winter again, but that's a couple of Watershed Academy participants. One, Emily Escher, who will speak with us on a workshop coming up. I put up a picture of us talking. We sit at tables, and unfortunately with masks, it will be a little more difficult, but all of life is that way now. So we will still be talking. We should be talking, and we'll just make sure that the speakers use microphones so we can hear, because that's the issue. We do this at Purdue regularly. We're all wearing masks, and the speakers simply use a microphone, and then you can still hear. Okay, and so what I needed to bring up for the first time is to get you thinking about it. This is not the deadline, but what we thought would be a really good use of the time together is to have really short talks by each of you. And this is the idea that you all know something that's worth telling people about. Now, hopefully you're not like, oh, this is a terrible news. I think for some people it'll be no problem. For others, we recognize that this is a step. One of the things that I want to say is you don't need to have slides. You don't need to give a talk like Julie just gave a talk, but you know something. And so what we're going to ask is that you choose some kind of a topic by February 28th. And then Sarah is going to put it into logical schedule, so that for everybody who wants to talk about education or something, we might put those together, right? So there will be these sessions where one person talks and then the next person talks. So again, what I wanted to say are slides are optional. Many of us are most comfortable with a PowerPoint, and Sarah will want you to get those in ahead of time, but you can use other kinds of visual aids. Or Sarah and I were reflecting last year, one of the most memorable talks was somebody who just got up and talked. Actually, it was by Zoom, so she just talked, no slides, and it was so interesting. It was about reaching some stakeholders in her watershed. So stakeholders is certainly a potentially good topic. This is just a list of some of the topics that people did last year. So I just thought we'd look at it. This is simply to give you ideas, right? They had no basis. That was the first time we did that. Converting in-person events to virtual format. Okay, it's a big topic. We can do something with it on 5 minutes, or you could talk about how you've done virtual events and maybe you were uncomfortable with it before. I think that was the one where she didn't have a slide. Engaging a difficult landowner, a story, and that was a great topic. If any of you love the Moth radio show like I do, you know that just stories are helpful. Something about a specific watershed, a SISMA. That's not a very well written topic, but I believe this is the invasive species management area or something like that. Some of you are nodding, so you know more about these. But somebody wanted, just a story of creating an organization to deal with a problem. Somebody knew a particular monitoring tool, a Pro Plus, whatever that was. And so she told us how she did it. So she demonstrated the tool. So that worked well. Something about
the coolest thing ever, really inexpensive too. If you need to do stream or lake depths, it's pretty sweet. I have to agree.
Oh, Sarah, you might want to put information about this, because one of the things that came up in our discussion was how hard it is to get sedimentation of reservoirs and bathymetry. So does it relate to that? I can't really remember, but if you can put
now
information
that
in the
I
chat.
can't help with, the DNR does have some data on that. They were mapping that through the Lake and River Enhancement Program. This is a floating object you essentially attach onto a fishing pole, and you can cast out, and it will show you for an area what the depth is. But it will not help you create a permanent map in any way.
Okay.
But it is pretty sweet. Just Google Deeper Pro Plus and you'll find it.
Okay, so good to know. And so we learned about that from one of the participants. So you say the knowledge that you have to share may be very specific, just something you once found was useful. And, we're just talking a few minutes. You don't have to fill up the whole 5 minutes. So anything that you've learned along the way that might be helpful to each other, right? As we've talked about, it's the networking that's so valuable here. So this is a chance to think of something that you've learned that you could share with others. I don't know that I need to go through the rest, but that's my last slide. So if anybody has any suggestions offhand, we could take some time to brainstorm. Otherwise, I'll just finish by talking about the next module. Or Sarah, if you want to add any ideas, that would be great. But any of you feel free to jump in with a question or suggestion or idea.
I don't want to jump in with an idea, but I do want to remind everyone that if you're overwhelmed by the idea of talking for 5 minutes, like everyone's an expert. So think about something that you're very familiar with and don't get overwhelmed by the idea that you don't have any particular knowledge to share with other people, because you do. I see a hand from Laura.
Good, Laura, please go ahead.
Yes, I was just trying to confirm we're going to do a talk after the next 2 weeks in the next module, or is this during McCormick's Creek?
No, all we're asking is for you to have a topic by February 28th. Just list the topic. Here's your, like it here's. I'm going to tell about a story about a difficult landowner, or I'm going to tell about this educational program I did. You are not doing it until March 29th in person. Okay. So it's two months until you're actually doing it.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I just want to confirm.
Thank you for doing that. I'm sure other people had the same question. We thought it was the right time to bring it up so that you just start thinking about it, but not the right time to worry about it or anything like that. Also, Sarah or I are certainly happy to talk to somebody if you sort of think, well, I have this thing, it might be interesting, but I'm not sure it's interesting or something like that. So pick something. I would look at it as, what's something that you've learned along the way that you want to share. So we're all, ahead of each other on something. Okay, then I will go ahead. So our last item, let me just make sure I'm looking at it. Lightning talk interruption workshop. Okay, so the other thing that I want to quick talk about is the module that's coming up. And so this one is called Tools for Developing a Watershed Inventory, or the Desktop Survey. There's some I got the right thing shared. Okay. Some introductory materials that tell about these various sources. I had mentioned that there's an alternative to web soil survey that's called Soil Web, but I didn't actually present it, but information is here. It's gives you really exactly the same information because the soil survey databases is all there, but it's a different entryway into it. And many people prefer it, but I heard a lot of glowing comments about web soil survey in my small group. So people are happy with that too. This one is probably just a little more mobile friendly. So what I wanted to say is, again, if you have done these, if using Indiana Map and Web Soil Survey would not be useful to you for whatever reason, pick a different tool. But we don't have the assignment laid out. So you kind of have to think through what would be useful and then just tell us how you use it. Explain what you did and how it's useful in your watershed. So you can explain any of these. So we have the long list that we also handed out. So we're trying to share tools. Sarah, have we done, I don't know that we did this, but we could have a discussion forum. It hasn't always been very successful, but if any of you would be willing to share anything about tools, it is a great thing to learn from each other of what people have found is useful. So we might put that discussion forum up and send you an email. And if anybody adds to it, that would be terrific. Otherwise, I just wanted to show you what we have. So the assignment asks you to answer several questions for your watershed. This information is exactly in the video. Okay, where do I link to the video? Sorry. Well, okay, I didn't review that. All right. This is the easiest place to actually get them from here, or we'll post these links. But there's 3 videos that you really want for this assignment. There's 2 on Indiana Map, and there's 1 on Web Soil Survey, and they were made specifically to help you go through this. So they just show the steps. So I do want to make sure that you know that and you go to look at them. I guess it could be a little clearer how to write that, but it shows how to do all these things, and then you'll do it on your own site. So this gives the concept, the videos are there, and then at the very end of the assignment, I don't know if this was the best way to do it, but we wrote down step-by-step instructions if you would prefer to look at it on paper rather than the video. But the videos are like 8 minutes, something like that, that just show you through those. So I think that it's the easiest method to learn that. So that's really what I wanted to show you. See, all the instructions are very clear. So for Indiana Map and Web Soil Survey, we've given questions, what's the date, what are the streams, what's the area of your watershed, how many dams are there, and make a map. Oh, I guess the one other thing that I wanted to mention is the way to capture the map for your assignment. A lot of people end up making a PDF, and that's okay, but then you have a lot of files to manipulate. My favorite is the snipping tool. In fact, that's how I just made this thing. I'm using it all the time. If you don't know it, it's a Windows tool, very easy. So you can just click on a new thing and then just take new, and then you can just copy any part of your window and paste it somewhere else. So I think that would be the easiest, most streamlined way to go from your map into a Word document, and then you just have one Word document. That's my suggestion for you. All right, any questions or comments about this R3 learning module?
I have
All right.
one, and I told group 1 earlier, the goal of this module is for you to kind of dabble around with these tools and not be complete experts in their use. So if you get bogged down at any point in time and feel like you don't really understand what's going on, or you've spent a lot of time on it, don't do that. Just stop working. The goal is for you to kind of just get in there and play around and become familiar with the tools that are available, and not with the pressure of having an assignment to turn in. So feel free to stop and turn in what you have, even if you don't complete the whole thing.
Well said. What we want is for all of you to say, wow, that was really interesting. I had no idea I could do that. That's what we're hoping, rather than you've got every single thing there that we suggested. So hopefully we've given you some ideas that will get you to the place where you will have learned something that's useful to you. So that's what we look forward to seeing. And I will say that, by the time I just reread some from last year, and that's what most people say. So we hope that you will, again, certainly contact us if you don't. If anybody is going to use Model My Watershed, I will be interested in it because I haven't used it much either. So do get in touch with me. With that, otherwise we'll end. It'll be 8 minutes early, so you can go out and enjoy the snow. I think Eric had some child with him, and I don't know if any of the rest of you have, but there's certainly where I'm sitting, a lot of snow to look at. And hopefully that's a good thing from where you're at, and not a terrible thing. But so be safe, all of you. Any closing remarks? Okay. So once again, I would just say, if, I'm putting the link to the feedback here. If you're willing to put any feedback, just click on that and then you'll go there and you can say whatever you want. Anything is useful, or if you don't, that's fine too. This is not required by any means. Thank you, everybody. And we will see you in 2 weeks.